technology, would you count that as contentious or not so contentious? It seems to there's not been a lot of talk about it in the corridors here, because I thought that was one of the planks of the agreement, the transfer of technology section.
The transfer of technology section is actually one of the better ones. There's a high level of agreement in principle on the need for having some mechanisms for having a technology transfer body. That was a Chinese demand, that was a long-standing demand that has been accepted. The contentious parts of everything are money, because money is going to be needed for mitigation, adaptation, technology, and RED. And money is not being negotiated in those sections. So that's why I said that the sections dealing with RED, the section dealing with technology, and the section dealing with adaptation are making progress on the basis that we assume money will be available. What will we do with the money when we get it? And that there is a level of agreement on. The money is in the finance section, and it's all rolled into one. It's money for everything, and it's all about amounts. It's a quantitative figure. The amounts on offer are about 1/10 of the amounts on demand, and they're going to have to meet in the middle. That's a classic compromise.
So is one scenario that in the last evening, or whenever they get down to it, or on the last day and the last evening, money will be the element that breaks or makes the deal? If enough money finally comes in and the industrialized countries say, okay, we're going to show our hand now, this is the sum we're talking about, developing countries will say, yep, that's okay, or no, that's not nearly enough, and they get done. That's what's going to be decisive.
That's going to be one of the key issues, because if there isn't a sufficient amount of money on offer, then I think the developing countries will not sign on to it. Prime Minister Gordon Brown's coming in today, a day early, and I think he's going to try and rally the troops and try and get something done here. It'll have to be done at their level.
He's got plenty of debt he can offer around. Okay, Jeff, there's something else coming in, I think.
Yeah, two other questions here. One about the temperature rise. One person wants to know, is a 2-degree target sufficient, or is 1.5 degrees really necessary? And then another is back on the question of NGOs. One person's asking how many industrial NGOs are granted access compared to environmental NGOs. I think that's really a question about sort of industry groups as opposed to environmental NGOs.
Well, let me take the NGOs first. The way the NGOs are divided from the Secretariat's point of view, they're categorized into environmental NGOs, probably the biggest number, business NGOs or bingos, and then nowadays we also have youth NGOs. A lot of youth come to these meetings, so they're another category. There's also a fourth category called RINGOs, or research independent institutions, RINGO NGOs. They're generally much smaller in number. What they've done with respect to access into the convention is that registered NGOs of whatever kind, each delegation has been given a small fraction of the number of secondary badges. So just having the normal badge isn't going to be enough. You need a secondary badge, and they've been given probably 1/5 the total number of delegates they had here, to restrict the numbers because they've over-registered, and they've got much, much higher than expected delegates from countries who are not being restricted. So Brazil, I heard, has 800 people on their delegation here. That's a unusually, hugely unusual number. So that's the problem with the NGOs. What was the first question?
The other question is about 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees.
Well, the developed countries in general, and the science as well from the IPCC, says that 2 degrees is what one might call a globally catastrophic temperature threshold that we must avoid at a global level. However, we are seeing impacts already with a 0.7 degree temperature rise that has already occurred. We will have another 0.7 degrees temperature rise inevitably and unavoidably over the next 20 years, and those will cause impacts. The concern of some of the more vulnerable countries, particularly the small island states, is that if 2 degrees gives a globally safe world, it doesn't give them a safe world. They go underwater at 2 degrees, and for them, they want a 1.5 degree target as the threshold, and there's a huge difference between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees. 2 degrees means they don't survive. The rest of the world might, but they don't, and therefore they're pushing for 1.5 degrees. Unfortunately, the way we're headed at the moment, we're probably heading for a 3.5 degree temperature rise. So they're nowhere near the 2 degree threshold either.
But 3.5 is truly catastrophic, isn't it?
Catastrophic. 3.5 is catastrophic globally for everybody. Nobody escapes. Not even rich countries. London gets flooded. Boston gets flooded. New York gets flooded. It's catastrophic for everybody.
So that reinforces the point that this isn't the end game in a sense. They've got to agree something. This is the beginning of the process. There'll have to be many other negotiations as they, in a sense, try and catch up with events, catch up with the science.
I think Copenhagen is really marks a new era in the climate change arena. It's sort of 20 years almost since the Framework Convention came into place. When it started, it was very much an environmental issue. It was a niche issue. Now it's a global issue, and it's all pervading in terms of the kinds of responses we need. We need to transform the global economy and wean it off fossil fuels into a cleaner pathway over the next few decades if we want to have a chance to survive. So it makes it vastly more important. So going forward from Copenhagen, it's a much bigger, much more complex game with much greater political significance than it used to have.